Jake stood at the edge of the abandoned building, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. A chill breeze rustled the remnants of old newspapers that littered the ground, sending a shiver down his spine. He pulled his worn jacket tighter around his small frame, the fabric frayed at the cuffs and collar. At just 12 years old, Jake had already learned the harsh realities of life in his rundown neighborhood. The peeling paint on the walls of the nearby houses mirrored the fading hopes of the families that lived there. Yet despite the despair that surrounded him, Jake held on to a flicker of ambition, a dream of a better life that felt just out of reach. With a practiced eye, he scanned the area for anything of value, his heart racing at the thought of finding a hidden treasure amid the debris. He had spent countless afternoons rummaging through the remnants of the town's forgotten places, collecting scrap metal and other discarded items to sell for a few cents. It wasn't much, but it helped his mother put food on the table. She worked long hours at the diner, and Jake knew how much she depended on him to contribute to their meager household. "Come on, Jake," he whispered to himself, determination fueling his movements. "You can find something today." As he moved closer to the building's entrance, Jake noticed a gaping hole where a door once stood. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the smell of dampness and decay wafting toward him. He hesitated for a moment, peering into the shadows. The place was rumored to be haunted, a relic of a time long past when the millionaire Thomas Eldridge had roamed the town, a man whose wealth had become a ghost story in its own right. Eldridge had disappeared years ago, leaving behind a legacy of curiosity and whispers among the townsfolk. "Just a quick look," he muttered, stepping inside. The floor creaked beneath his sneakers, each sound echoing in the silence. Dust danced in the slivers of light that broke through the boarded-up windows, and Jake felt as though he had entered another world, a world where secrets lingered like the dust motes in the air. He searched through the remnants of old furniture and broken glass, his fingers brushing against the cold surfaces, searching for anything that could be of use. As he moved deeper into the building, he stumbled upon a wall that looked different from the others. It was partially hidden by an old, tattered curtain, and Jake's curiosity piqued. He pulled the curtain aside, revealing a small compartment set into the wall, almost as if it had been waiting for him. Heart pounding with excitement, he approached the compartment and carefully pried it open. Inside lay a stack of dusty documents, yellowed with age and filled with the scent of forgotten history. He pulled them out gingerly, feeling the weight of their significance in his hands. The name Thomas Eldridge was scrawled across the top of one of the pages, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had heard stories about Eldridge, how he had once been one of the richest men in the area, how his sudden disappearance had left a void that no one could explain. "Wow," Jake breathed, his eyes darting over the papers filled with legal jargon and sketches of properties. He felt like he had stumbled upon a hidden treasure, a treasure that could change his life forever. But what did these documents actually mean? He scanned the pages, trying to piece together their importance, but the words were complex and foreign to him. Still, the excitement of the find buzzed in his veins. "What do you have there?" A voice interrupted his thoughts, and Jake jumped, nearly dropping the papers. He turned to see Emma, his best friend, standing in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Emma, you scared me!" Jake exclaimed, clutching the documents tightly to his chest. "What are you doing in this dump?" she asked, stepping inside and wrinkling her nose at the musty odor. "You know this place is supposed to be haunted, right?" "Yeah, but look what I found." He held up the stack of documents, his eyes shining with excitement. "They belong to Thomas Eldridge." Emma's brows shot up in surprise as she took a step closer, her curiosity piqued. "Are you serious? The Thomas Eldridge, the millionaire who disappeared?" "Yeah, these must be important," Jake said, flipping through the pages. "I don't know what they say, but I feel like they could be worth something." Emma leaned in, trying to catch a glimpse of the papers. "We should take them to someone who can help us figure it out. Maybe we can return them to his family or something." Jake's mind raced at the thought. Returning the documents could be an opportunity, a chance to escape their current lives and step into a world that felt utterly foreign to him. "You think they'd even care?" he asked, doubt creeping into his voice. "Eldridge has been gone for so long. What if they don't want anything to do with it?" "Come on, Jake," Emma urged, her brown eyes sparkling with determination. "This could be our big break. Just think about it. If we can help his family, maybe they'd reward us. We could finally get out of this place." Jake considered her words, his heart racing at the prospect. "You really think they'd give us something? Like money or a scholarship?" "Why not?" Emma said, her voice filled with excitement. "You never know unless you try. Besides, we have to do something with these documents. They deserve to be returned to their rightful owner." Jake nodded slowly, the thrill of the adventure igniting a fire in his chest. "Okay, let's do it. We'll take them to the Eldridge estate tomorrow. But first, let's make sure we understand what's in these papers." As they meticulously examined the documents, Jake felt a sense of purpose wash over him. This was more than just scavenging for scraps. This was a chance to change their lives, to prove that they were more than just the product of their circumstances. They could be heroes in their own story. When they finished reviewing the papers, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the abandoned building cloaked in darkness. Jake and Emma stepped outside, the cool night air refreshing against their skin. They looked at each other, a shared understanding passing between them. They were about to embark on a journey that could alter the course of their lives forever. "Tomorrow, then," Jake said, a grin spreading across his face. "We'll return these documents and see what happens." "Tomorrow," Emma echoed, her eyes glinting with excitement as they walked home together, the promise of adventure ahead of them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn of Eldridge Manor, Jake and Emma hesitated at the rusted iron gate. The mansion loomed ahead, its once grand structure now draped in vines and neglect. Jake felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The documents he had found were in his backpack, heavy with the weight of history, and now it was time to return them. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her wide eyes scanning the decaying facade of the mansion. "What if they don't believe us?" Jake squared his shoulders, his heart racing. "We have to try. These belong to Thomas Eldridge. If anyone knows about them, it's his family." With a determined nod, they pushed open the gate. It creaked ominously, echoing through the stillness of the evening. They walked up the cracked pathway, feeling the weight of the stories held within the walls of the manor. Once they reached the door, Jake hesitated again, glancing at Emma. "You ready?" he asked, trying to inject some confidence into the moment. Emma nodded, and with a deep breath, Jake knocked. The sound echoed, reverberating inside the cavernous entrance. They waited, the anticipation thick in the air. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with graying hair tied neatly in a bun. Her expression was skeptical, and her eyes narrowed as she took in the sight of the two children. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharp and demanding. We're here to see Mr. Eldridge's son," Jake stammered, feeling small under her scrutinizing gaze. "We have something important to return." The housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, crossed her arms, her brow furrowing. "And why would I let you in? You're just a couple of kids." Emma stepped forward, her voice steadier than Jake's. "We found these documents that belonged to Mr. Eldridge. They might be important to his family." Mrs. Thompson studied them for a long moment, as if weighing their sincerity. Finally, she sighed, uncrossing her arms. "Fine, but wait here." She turned on her heel and walked deeper into the darkened hallway. Jake and Emma exchanged glances, their hearts pounding. They had taken a bold step into a world that felt utterly foreign to them, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at Jake's stomach. Moments later, Mrs. Thompson returned, gesturing for them to follow. "Come," she commanded, leading them through the dimly lit corridors adorned with faded tapestries and dust-covered furniture. Each step echoed with the history of the place, and Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with anxiety. They reached a door at the end of the hallway where Mrs. Thompson knocked sharply before entering. "Brian, you have some visitors," she announced curtly. Brian Eldridge, a man in his 30s with tousled hair and weary eyes, looked up from a cluttered desk strewn with papers and empty coffee cups. He appeared surprised to see two children standing in his office. "What is this about?" he asked, leaning back in his chair, his expression shifting from surprise to curiosity. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Mr. Eldridge, We found these documents in the old building near town. They belong to your father. Brian's eyebrows raised as he took the documents from Jake's outstretched hand. He examined them closely, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. These are the missing files. I thought they were lost forever. He looked up, his eyes alight with a mix of hope and disbelief. How did you come across these? Jake shared a glance with Emma, who nodded encouragingly. We were just exploring, and we found a hidden compartment in the wall. Brian leaned forward, his interest piqued. You didn't know what you had, did you? These could contain information about my father's hidden assets, things that could change everything for me. He paused, looking at them with newfound respect. You two might have just done me a huge favor. Emma smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. We just thought it was the right thing to do. Brian took a moment to gather his thoughts, then looked at Jake with an intensity that made him a bit uneasy. And what do you want in return for this? Surely you didn't come all the way here just out of goodwill? Jake shifted on his feet, feeling the weight of the question. He had thought about this. The two of them had discussed it at length before coming. Actually, I was hoping for a scholarship to a good school, Jake said, surprising even himself with the audacity of his request. Brian blinked, taken aback. A scholarship? You realize that's a big ask, right? You're just kids. Why should I grant you that? Because, Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. I want a chance to do something better with my life. I know I can do well if given the opportunity. Emma jumped in, her enthusiasm bubbling over. Jake is really smart. He deserves a shot. And if we're helping you recover what's rightfully yours, it makes sense, doesn't it? The room fell silent for a moment as Brian processed their request. Jake's heart raced as he watched the man's expression change, a mix of surprise and contemplation. You're serious, aren't you? You really think you're entitled to a scholarship just because you returned some old papers? Jake squared his shoulders, determination flooding his veins. It's not just about the papers. It's about what they represent. I know what it means to struggle, and I want to break free from that cycle. Brian studied him, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw a flicker of respect in the man's eyes. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. Let me think about it. I can't make any promises right now. Jake's heart sank slightly, but he nodded, understanding that it was the best he could expect. That's fair. I just hope you see this as a chance for both of us. As they left the mansion, the weight of the encounter lingered in the air. Jake felt a mix of hope and uncertainty, while Emma walked beside him, her brow furrowed in thought. What do you think will happen? She asked, breaking the silence as they made their way back down the path. I don't know, Jake replied honestly, but I think we made an impression. He seemed interested, at least. Yeah, but you really put yourself out there asking for a scholarship. What if he decides it's too much? Jake kicked a small rock along the path, his mind racing. Then I'll figure something else out. I can't just go back to being the same kid forever. I need a change. As they reached the gate, they could hear whispers from the townsfolk who had gathered nearby, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. Jake felt a shiver run down his spine as he overheard snippets of their conversation. Did you hear what that boy asked for? One woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. Asking for a scholarship like he's entitled to it. Who does he think he is? Another chimed in. Jake clenched his fists, feeling the sting of their words. They don't understand, he muttered, anger bubbling beneath the surface. They don't know what it's like. Emma placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Let them talk. You did what you thought was right. That's what matters. As they walked away, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the brink of something monumental. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and potential backlash, but for the first time in his life, he felt a flicker of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could change his destiny. Jake felt like a fish out of water as he stepped into the grand ballroom of the charity gala, the opulence around him overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the sea of elegantly dressed patrons swirling about, laughter and the clinking of glasses echoing in his ears. He tugged nervously at the collar of his second-hand shirt, the fabric rough against his skin. This was a world far removed from his everyday life, where the most luxurious thing he owned was a pair of scuffed sneakers. Do you think they'll take me seriously? he asked Brian, who was adjusting his tie with a confidence that Jake envied. Of course, Brian replied, flashing a reassuring smile. Just be yourself. You've got something they want, Jake. That scholarship isn't just a handout. It's a ticket to a better life. Jake nodded, trying to muster the courage he needed. He had spent countless hours rehearsing his pitch in front of the mirror, but now, with the weight of the gala pressing down on him, his words felt jumbled. He scanned the room, spotting familiar faces from the town, people who had whispered behind his back, who had judged him for daring to ask for a scholarship instead of a simple reward. As they moved through the crowd, Brian introduced Jake to several influential guests. "This is Jake," he would say, his tone dripping with pride. "He's the one who found those documents of my father's, a real up-and-comer." Each introduction was met with polite nods and forced smiles, but Jake could sense the undercurrents of skepticism. They didn't see him as a boy with ambition. They saw him as a poor kid trying to reach for something he didn't deserve. After a few more introductions, Jake found himself standing next to a table laden with canapes. He picked at a tiny quiche, his stomach growling in protest. "I'm not sure I belong here," he murmured to Emma, who had accompanied him to the gala for moral support. She stood beside him, her eyes shining with excitement. "Don't let them intimidate you," she said, her voice firm. "You deserve this. Just remember what you want to achieve." As the evening progressed, Jake found himself more at ease, especially when they moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "You know," Emma said, leaning in closer, "I overheard some people talking about a project your friend's father was involved in before he disappeared." "What project?" Jake asked, intrigued. "It was something big, something that could change everything," she explained, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "They said it involved a lot of money and some shady dealings. Maybe it's connected to why he vanished." "Do you think we should find out more?" Jake pondered, his curiosity piqued. Emma nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. If we can uncover what really happened, it might even help your case for the scholarship if it has anything to do with the Eldridge fortune." Jake's heart raced at the thought. The gala was not just a chance to secure his future. It might also be the key to unraveling a mystery that had haunted the town for years. But before he could voice his thoughts, a commotion erupted on the other side of the room, drawing their attention. A group of well-dressed individuals had gathered around a tall man who was gesturing animatedly. "I'm telling you, Thomas was onto something huge. He had evidence that could expose the entire operation," the man exclaimed, his voice rising above the chatter. Jake exchanged a glance with Emma, excitement coursing through him. This was it, the secret project. They needed to know more. "Let's go closer," he whispered, pulling Emma along before she could protest. As they approached, Jake strained to hear the conversation. "But he disappeared before he could reveal anything," another voice countered, laced with skepticism. "No one knows what happened to those documents, or who might have wanted him silenced," the first man replied ominously. "People were scared of what he might uncover. He had enemies in high places." Jake swallowed hard, feeling a chill run down his spine. This was not just a missing persons case. It was a tangled web of secrets, lies, and danger. He glanced at Emma, who was wide-eyed with anticipation. "We have to find out more about this," Jake said, determination igniting within him. "If we can connect the dots, it might help us get the scholarship." Just then, Brian rejoined them, a broad smile plastered across his face. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, nothing," Jake said quickly, trying to mask his excitement. "Just enjoying the gala." "Right," Brian replied, his tone dripping with suspicion. "Well, we should mingle a bit more. I have some people I want you to meet." As the night went on, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something monumental. The missing documents, the secrets surrounding Thomas Eldridge, and now this mysterious project, it all felt intertwined in ways he was only beginning to understand. When they finally returned home, Jake couldn't help but recount the evening's events to Emma in hushed whispers. "We have to investigate more. If Eldridge had evidence of something big, it could change everything," he insisted, his eyes blazing with fervor. "Agreed," Emma said, her voice tinged with excitement. "But where do we start?" "Maybe we can find a way to get a hold of those documents," Jake suggested. If Brian knows anything about them, he might be our best lead. Or he could be hiding things, Emma warned, her brow furrowing. We need to be careful. It's not just some old documents we're dealing with, it's a whole legacy of secrets. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous things could become. But he was determined to see it through. The possibility of a scholarship was just the beginning. Uncovering the truth about Thomas Eldridge could change not only his life, but potentially the lives of everyone in their town. Over the next few days, they delved deeper into their investigation, piecing together what they could find about Eldridge and the project. They scoured the library for old newspaper articles, and even interviewed some of the townsfolk who might have known him. Their search led them to a dusty old journal hidden in a forgotten corner of the library, its pages filled with cryptic notes and references to betrayal. As they flipped through the yellowed pages, Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. The words hinted at deep-seated corruption and a web of deceit that spanned far beyond what they had initially imagined. "This is it, Emma," Jake said, his heart racing. This journal could hold the key to everything. As they examined the notes, the pieces of Eldridge's life began to fit together, revealing a man who had been both revered and feared. Jake's imagination raced. Could they really be on the brink of exposing a scandal that had remained hidden for years? With every discovery, Jake felt the thrill of the chase, but he also sensed the looming danger. They were treading into territory that might not just threaten their ambitions, but their very safety. Yet, the thought of turning back was not an option. With Emma by his side and the truth beckoning them, Jake knew they were destined to uncover the secrets that had been buried for far too long. Jake and Emma sat cross-legged on the floor of Jake's dimly lit bedroom, the air thick with anticipation as they pored over the worn journal they had unearthed from Thomas Eldridge's estate. The yellowed pages crackled beneath their fingers. The ink faded, yet legible enough to reveal snippets of a life steeped in intrigue. Each entry they read seemed to pull them deeper into a web of deception that surrounded Eldridge's mysterious disappearance. "What do you think he meant by, 'the time for reckoning is near'?" Emma asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. She leaned closer to the journal, her dark hair falling over her shoulder as she pointed at a particularly ominous passage. Jake squinted at the words, his mind racing. "It sounds like he was onto something huge. Maybe he was going to expose that corrupt partner of his," he replied, his voice a mix of excitement and concern. The thrill of discovery was palpable, but so was the creeping dread that something sinister lingered just out of sight. "Do you think that partner is still a threat? I mean, he could be watching us right now?" Emma said, her eyes darting toward the window, half expecting to see a shadow lurking outside. Jake swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I don't know, but we have to be careful. If Eldridge was killed or made to disappear because of this, we might be in over our heads." He shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the journal feeling heavier in his hands. As they contemplated their next move, a rustling sound broke the silence. Jake's heart raced as he glanced toward the door, which was slightly ajar. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, leaning closer to Emma. "Yeah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if someone is out there?" Jake's instincts kicked in. "We need to hide the journal. If someone's watching us, they can't find this." He quickly shoved the journal beneath his bed, and they both fell silent, straining to hear any further sounds. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, until finally, they heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. Jake exhaled slowly, relief flooding through him. "I think it's clear," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But we should still be careful. If we're onto something big, others will want to keep it hidden." Emma nodded, her expression serious. "Let's meet at the park tomorrow morning. We can talk more there, somewhere we're less likely to be interrupted." The next day, the sun rose with a promise of clarity, but the unease from the previous night lingered. Jake arrived at the park before Emma, his thoughts racing. A sense of foreboding hung in the air as he scanned the area, half expecting to see a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off his apprehension. When Emma finally arrived, she was out of breath and slightly flushed. "Sorry I'm late. I had to make sure no one was following me," she said, glancing over her shoulder as they walked deeper into the park, past the old oak trees and the scattered picnic tables. "Me too," Jake admitted. "I can't shake this feeling that someone's watching us. We need to figure out what to do with that journal." They settled on a bench, the wood warm from the sun. Jake pulled the journal from his backpack and laid it between them. "Let's go through it again. There has to be something here that can help us connect the dots." As they flipped through the pages, a particular entry caught Jake's eye. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a passage dated just weeks before Eldridge disappeared. "It says here that Eldridge was planning a meeting with someone named Victor Hawthorne. He was supposed to expose him." Emma leaned closer, her eyes wide. "Victor Hawthorne? That name sounds familiar. Isn't he the one who runs that construction company? The one that built half the new developments in town?" "Yeah," Jake replied, his mind racing. If Eldridge was going to expose him, it could explain why he vanished. But why would he want to expose his own business partner? There has to be more to this. Suddenly, a shadow fell across their bench, interrupting their discussion. They looked up to find Brian standing there, an amused expression on his face. "What are you two up to?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. Jake's heart raced. He quickly closed the journal and shoved it back into his backpack. "Just hanging out," he said, trying to sound casual. Brian raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You two look like you're scheming," he teased. But there was an edge to his voice that made Jake uneasy. Emma, quick to deflect, smiled brightly. "We were just talking about school, planning for the future." Brian seemed to buy it, but his gaze lingered on Jake, as if he could sense something amiss. "Planning for the future, huh? Good to see you both so motivated. Just remember, Jake, not everyone is as lucky to have opportunities handed to them. Keep your nose clean and stay out of trouble." His words felt like a warning, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Brian was more involved in Eldridge's past than he let on. As Brian walked away, Emma turned to Jake, her voice low. "Do you think he knows what we found?" "I don't know," Jake replied, his mind spinning. "But we can't let him intimidate us. We have to push forward." That evening, the tension between Jake and Brian simmered just below the surface. Jake felt a nagging sense of betrayal. Brian had been the one to offer him the scholarship, but now it felt like there were strings attached, a hidden agenda lurking just beneath the surface. "Do you think we should tell him about the journal?" Emma asked as they walked home that night. "Not yet," Jake said firmly. "I need to know more about him first. I feel like he's hiding something important, and if he's involved in this mess, I don't want to put us in danger." As the days passed, Jake and Emma continued to investigate. They spent hours at the local library, poring over old newspapers and archives in search of any mention of Eldridge or Hawthorne. The more they dug, the more they uncovered a tangled tale of ambition, greed, and betrayal. One afternoon, while flipping through a dusty old newspaper, Jake stumbled upon a photograph that made his stomach churn. It was a grainy image of Eldridge standing outside a building marked with the name of Hawthorne's construction company. The caption read, "Eldridge threatens to expose Hawthorne's illicit dealings." "Look at this," Jake exclaimed, showing the article to Emma. "This is it. This is what we've been looking for." Emma's eyes widened as she read the article. "This is huge, Jake. If Eldridge was about to expose Hawthorne, then we need to be very careful. What if Hawthorne is still out there, trying to keep those secrets buried?" Jake nodded, feeling a chill run down his spine. "We have to figure out what happened to Eldridge. If he was killed, we could be next if we get too close to the truth." Their investigation took a darker turn as they began to notice strange occurrences. A black car parked near the library whenever they visited, and they spotted a figure watching them from a distance. The sense of danger became palpable, and both Jake and Emma felt the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. "We need to confront Brian," Emma insisted one evening as they sat in Jake's room, the journal spread open before them. "He's the only one who can help us navigate this, the wealthy people and their secrets." Jake hesitated, fear creeping in again. "What if he's involved? What if he's not who we think he is?" Emma bit her lip, considering his words. "We'll have to tread carefully, but we can't keep this to ourselves any longer. We need to know what he knows, and if he's hiding something, we'll figure it out." Taking a deep breath, Jake agreed. "Okay, but we need to be strategic about it. Let's not mention the journal right away. Just ask him about Eldridge and Hawthorne, see how he reacts." With their plans set, they resolved to meet Brian the next day. hopeful yet apprehensive about what lay ahead. Little did they know, the confrontation would reveal more than they bargained for, and the secrets of the past would spill into their present, changing everything they thought they knew. Jake and Emma stood in the dimly lit office of Thomas Eldridge, their hearts racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of old paper lingered, a testament to the years of neglect. Shadows danced on the walls as the sunlight filtered through the cracked windows, illuminating the remnants of a life once lived in opulence. They had heard whispers of hidden treasures and secrets within these walls, and now they were on the brink of uncovering something monumental. "Are you sure about this?" Emma whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. She glanced nervously at the door, half expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Jake nodded, his determination unwavering. "We have to find out what Brian is hiding. If the documents we found implicate him, we can't let this go. Not now." Together, they approached a large oak desk, cluttered with papers and old photographs, most of which were yellowed with age. Jake noticed a large, ornate safe embedded in the wall behind the desk. Its surface was scratched and tarnished, but the intricate design hinted at its value. "Look at that," Emma said, pointing at the safe. "It must contain something important." Jake examined the safe closely. "I've seen one like this in a movie. If we can crack the code, we might find something that links Brian to Eldridge's disappearance." "Do you even know the code?" Emma raised an eyebrow, skepticism creeping into her voice. "Not yet," Jake admitted. "But I think I can figure it out. Eldridge was a genius. He might have left a clue somewhere." They began to search through the papers scattered across the desk, hoping to find anything that would lead them to the code. Minutes felt like hours as they rifled through each document, their hearts pounding louder with every passing second. Finally, Emma let out a soft gasp. "Jake, look at this!" She held up a small notebook, its cover worn but intact. The pages were filled with Eldridge's neat handwriting, mathematical equations, and what appeared to be a series of numbers. "Maybe these are the keys to the safe," Jake said, leaning in closer. "Let's see if they match anything." After a few moments of scrutiny, Jake's eyes brightened. "Here, this sequence looks familiar. 1923. It might be the code." "Then let's try it," Emma urged, her excitement palpable. Jake approached the safe, his fingers trembling slightly as he input the numbers. With a final click, the safe door creaked open, revealing a trove of documents, photographs, and an old, dust-covered ledger. "Holy cow," Emma breathed, her eyes widening as Jake pulled out the first document. It was a faded contract detailing a series of business transactions that seemed to involve Brian's family and Eldridge's estate. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to a line in the contract. "It mentions payment for cover-ups? What does that even mean?" Emma leaned closer, her brow furrowing. "It sounds like they were involved in something shady. We need to take these and show them to someone." Suddenly, the door creaked, and both kids froze. They exchanged wide-eyed glances, their hearts racing as they strained to listen. "Who's in here?" a voice called out, familiar and laced with frustration. It was Brian. "Jake, we have to go," Emma whispered urgently. But Jake was already stepping backward, clutching the ledger tightly. "Not yet. We have to confront him," Jake insisted, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Are you crazy? He's going to—" Before she could finish, Brian burst through the door, his face a mixture of anger and surprise. "What are you two doing in here?" Jake stood tall, holding up the ledger as if it were a shield. "We know about the contract, Brian. We know what you're hiding." Brian's expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing his features before he masked it with a cold smile. "You think you can just waltz in here and threaten me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then tell us the truth," Emma shot back, her voice rising. "You can't keep lying about your father's legacy." Brian took a step closer, his demeanor changing from indignation to something more sinister. "You two are in way over your heads. If you think you can expose me, you're mistaken." Jake felt a chill run down his spine at Brian's words. "Why? What are you so afraid of? This is about your father, Brian. Don't you want to know what really happened?" "Enough!" Brian shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. You're just a couple of kids playing detective. You have no idea what's at stake here." "Maybe you're the one who doesn't understand," Jake replied, his voice gaining strength. "This isn't just about you. It's about the truth." As tension crackled in the air, Brian's facade slipped further. "You really think you can just take those documents and run with them? You're making a big mistake. I can make your life very difficult if I want to." The threat hung heavy between them, but Jake stood firm. "You can try, but we're not afraid of you." Brian's eyes narrowed as he took a step back, recalibrating his approach. "I'll make you a deal. You hand over those documents, and I'll ensure you still get that scholarship. Keep digging, and you might find yourself in more trouble than you bargained for." Emma scoffed. "You think we're going to trust you after this? You're hiding something, and we're not going to back down." "Then you're both fools," Brian said, his voice laced with menace. "You have no idea what kind of power my family wields. You think you're on the right side of this? You're just kids." Jake clenched his fists, feeling a surge of anger. "We're not afraid of you or your family. We're going to expose the truth, no matter what it takes." Brian's expression hardened, and he turned on his heel, storming out of the office. "You'll regret this," he called over his shoulder, his voice echoing ominously down the hallway. As the door slammed shut, Jake and Emma shared a look of disbelief. "What just happened?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," Jake replied, still gripping the ledger tightly. "But we have to be careful. He's not going to let this go." They glanced at the safe and the documents inside, the weight of their discovery settling heavily on their shoulders. "We can't go public with this yet," Emma suggested, her mind racing. "We need more evidence. If Brian is involved in something illegal, we can't just waltz in with this." "Agreed. We need to find a way to gather more proof," Jake said, his resolve hardening. "But we can't let him intimidate us. We have to stay one step ahead." Just then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, startling both of them. "What was that?" Emma exclaimed, her eyes wide with fear. "Let's get out of here," Jake urged, leading the way toward the door. They had barely stepped outside when the unmistakable smell of smoke filled the air. "Oh no!" Emma gasped, her heart racing as she turned back toward the mansion. "The fire! We need to call for help!" But as they fled back into the hallway, they could see flames licking at the edges of the walls, smoke billowing into the air. Jake's mind raced as they sprinted toward the exit, the documents weighing heavily in his hand. "Jake, we have to leave the ledger!" Emma shouted, her eyes darting around for an escape route. "No," Jake cried. "We can't let them burn this. It's our only proof." With a final glance at the inferno spreading through the mansion, they dashed toward the nearest exit, adrenaline surging through their veins. As they burst through the door into the outside air, Jake felt the heat of the flames behind them, a stark reminder of the danger they were in. As they stumbled down the steps, they glanced back at the mansion, now engulfed in flames. The fire roared like a beast, eager to consume every shred of evidence they had fought so hard to uncover. "We have to regroup," Jake said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't let this be the end." Emma nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "We'll find another way. We have to." But in that moment, as they watched the flames dance in the night sky, both of them knew that the battle was far from over. The truth lay buried not just within the walls of the mansion, but in the shadows of their own lives, waiting to be unearthed. The dimly lit diner hummed with the low murmur of conversations and the clinking of silverware against dishes, providing a temporary refuge for Jake and Emma. They slid into a booth at the back, still reeling from the chaos of the fire that had consumed Eldridge's mansion. Jake's heart raced as he stared at the half-eaten slice of pie in front of him, his mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. "Do you think it was really an accident?" Emma asked, breaking the heavy silence that hung between them. Jake shook his head, brow furrowed. "No way. It was too convenient. Everything we found, it's like someone wanted to destroy it." He glanced around the diner, his instincts on high alert. "And I don't think it was just the fire. I think Brian had something to do with it." Emma leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard some people talking about the fire while we were waiting for our food. They said it was suspicious, like it was set deliberately." Jake's eyes widened. "See, we need to find proof, something that ties Brian to it. He can't just get away with this." As they spoke, The door to the diner swung open and a gust of wind swept in, bringing with it the scent of rain and something else, an unsettling feeling. Jake's gaze flicked to the entrance, where he spotted a familiar figure. Brian stood there, drenched from the downpour, shaking off droplets like a dog. He scanned the diner, and Jake instinctively sank lower in his seat, hoping he wouldn't notice them. "Looks like he's been following us," Emma muttered, her voice tinged with worry. "He can't know we're on to him," Jake replied, gripping the edge of the table. "We need to keep our heads down and figure out our next move." Brian approached the counter, ordering a cup of coffee, his back turned to them. Jake exchanged a furtive glance with Emma, and she nodded, understanding the unspoken plan. They needed to gather more information about Brian, especially after what happened at the mansion. "Let's follow him after he leaves," Emma suggested, her eyes bright with determination. "Right. But we need to be careful," Jake cautioned. "If he knows we're watching him, we could be in serious trouble." They finished their drinks quickly, barely tasting them, and waited with bated breath for Brian to leave. When he finally stepped out into the rain, Jake and Emma slipped out behind him, keeping a safe distance as he walked toward the downtown area. "Where do you think he's going?" Emma whispered, her heart racing as they ducked behind a lamppost. "Maybe to his office," Jake guessed, remembering the sleek building they had passed on their way to the mansion. "We have to see what he's up to." They trailed him cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the rain-soaked pavement. Brian walked with an air of confidence, oblivious to the two kids hot on his trail. As they neared the office building, Jake felt a surge of adrenaline. This was risky, but they needed to take the chance if they were going to uncover the truth. Once they reached the office, they crouched behind a nearby dumpster, peering through the dimly lit windows. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, filled with the scent of leather and polished wood. Brian was talking animatedly to a group of well-dressed individuals, gesturing emphatically. Jake strained to hear snippets of their conversation. "The documents were destroyed, but we can still recover." Brian's voice carried through the glass. "What if they find out?" a woman asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Brian waved his hand dismissively. "No one will know. We just need to keep everything under wraps. It's too important for the family legacy." Jake exchanged worried glances with Emma. This was bigger than they had thought. "We need to get inside," he whispered urgently.